I feel like I need to do something, for my community. How can I use all of my resources I have the perfect idea. Wait, feels too familiar. Been there, done that. I want a different vibe. This is way too cramped. Nah, a little too formal. Kind of like the Last Supper. Nope. Hello there, I'm Renee. Nah, that's a different show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Situations and Conversations. I am your host, Renee, and I am so excited that we are able to bring you a show with you in mind. We aim to empower, enlighten, educate, and entertain, of course. In my last E, I always forget, but it's elevate. But we want to elevate your consciousness to another level. We also want to highlight the situations that you all are experiencing, we all are experiencing every day with conversations. And so I want to get started, and I always want to start with the situation. So let me read this to you. I want to be an ally and support Black Lives Matter, but I'm not sure how or what to do. Well, because we love you so much around here, we definitely have someone that can speak to this authentically. Her name is Amie Wexler, and she is a personal friend as well as a community activist. And she also happens to be a major ally, and I love her for this. So please help me welcome Amie Wexler to the show. Amie, I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited and of course honored to be a guest on your show. Thank you.
Well, we've been talking about this for a long time. This being all of the unrest and all of the issues around the current climate in our country, especially those that are affecting Black and brown people in a different way. And you are always on the front lines. On social media, we go back and forth. I constantly see you at some kind of protest. You're going live while there's like tear gas getting thrown, and you are unafraid to be out there on behalf of the people. And I have to ask you, how have you been made to be like this? I mean, I've known you just for, a couple years, and I get the sense that you've always been like this, but I don't know. How did you start caring so much about people?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know exactly how it necessarily started. I see myself as an activist and a community organizer. And I think the greatest compliment I can get is being called an ally. So thank you for giving me that compliment, because that's what I would aim to be, and to be an accomplice in making systemic change. But calling myself that is pretty meaningless. It's hearing it from somebody else who's a person of color that makes me feel like that the work I'm doing is making a difference. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. Thank you, because I think that you are an example of what a lot of people want to be, but don't know how. I mean, the situation that I read is an actual situation that came in to me because people want to know, well, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do or how to do it. So how did you get your start in being a community organizer and an activist?
Well, I would say that that's probably just sort of backing up to the first thing you said was, I think it's sort of a common thing that white people turn to their Black friend, their Black neighbor, and say, what do I do? And that's, I would say, unfortunately, not necessarily the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. I think you need to look inward, and you need to do your own research and not always rely on people of color to educate you and tell you what it is you should be doing.
Thank you.
So in 2020, if you've reached this far and you don't yet know, sort of anything of like how best to educate yourself, then that's something you need to look at too. Like, how did you get this, to this point?
Yes.
We've got like the entire internet that can help you.
It's called
it's
Google.
in your pocket. Yeah,
right,
it's like
right.
right there. So you should start, making strides on your own before I think you turn to your, friends who you see as community activists or people of color and saying like, what do I do?
Right.
So that, do some research, I guess.
I love that, yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, I went to law school. I moved here to Portland in the 90s to go to law school and study environmental law.
And that was coming from Chicago.
Yeah, coming from the Chicago suburbs. And I went to University of Wisconsin for undergraduate. And I came here and I saw myself coming here as an activist. So I've always seen myself that way, and I don't necessarily know where that came from, but I've always, maybe it's even, I'm Jewish, and I think there's just sort of this sense that when you're raised in the Jewish community that you are expected to give back and be a part of the community. And there's a long history of Jewish people being involved in the civil rights movement. If you think back to the freedom rides, it was often Jewish folks who came down from the north and joined arms with black folks to sit at lunch counters and to get on the bus and make sure that buses were integrated and lunch counters were integrated. So it's sort of, I feel like it was in my DNA a bit, and I've wanted to always make a difference in some way. So initially it was as an environmental activist, and then I became involved, I think, actually in the innocence movement to free those who are wrongfully convicted.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so my paid job is for the Oregon Justice Resource Center, and a part of that is the Oregon Innocence Project. So every state has an innocence project, and the one in Oregon was just started in 2014. So I came on board in 2015, and it was always a part of why I wanted to do the work of freeing those wrongfully convicted, that it disproportionately impacts people of color. And so it's sort of like my blinders just sort of kept coming off, and seeing more and more the systemic injustice in our justice system and how disproportionately it impacts black people in particular. And I just became more and more involved, and it's sort of as Ferguson, the killing of Tamir Rice. There's just so many things that have just it just like different reveals, unfortunately, of what the experience is like in this country of being a person of color. It's seeing it through, obviously, my white lens. And so wanting to make a difference.
And I know that it's in every fiber of your being. But for the people who are listening and who are watching, I love how you said so many things, so I'm trying to pick apart some of the things you said. For people who maybe didn't grow up in a family where that was encouraged, to be a part of the community, to make sure that you made a difference. There are people who are sitting in super privileged. So to me, I feel like there are levels of privilege, right? There's regular privilege where, maybe you have some money and you don't get harassed a little bit. Then there's like this super privilege where you have either a lot of wealth or a lot of power or something behind you, where you are basically insulated from pretty much anything. You know what I mean? And so there are some people who are sitting here who may not have grown up in an environment like you, where that was kind of like the thing to do, to make sure that you were active in your community, no matter what color, creed, ethnicity, religion somebody was or is. And maybe they're sitting here listening or watching and thinking, you know what, I've seen so many things over this last 365 days, right? Like, it's been such a wild ride. Like, you couldn't even write a movie script better than what's like unfolding in our country, right? And for folks that are black and brown, colored folks, as my grandmother used to say, we're out here, really struggling to understand how we're supposed to thrive, right? While the super privileged are sitting up there kind of like, but maybe they.
Well, I think, we sort of have this problem in this country where it's like, well, I'm a good white person, don't you know? Like, I'm not racist. Those are the people who are saying racist things. That's not me. But the fact is, we all swim in the soup together. Like, this is how we were brought up. And even if you don't say things that are outwardly racist, you're living in a racist system and participating in it. So, you know, it's, you know, I hope that in my actions, you know, in my day-to-day life, that I am not doing things that are, that impact other people and, you know, are racist. But I know that I unintentionally do and have, because I grew up in America as a white person. And so, you know, yes, I'm Jewish, but I have all the white privileges of being white, right? So, you know, my hope is that I certainly can be called out on anything that I do that's unintentional and make amends for anything that I've done. But, you know, even if you see yourself as a person who's a good white person who's not doing things that are intentionally racist, because you're benefiting from a racist system, it's all of us. So, you know, it's not exactly really answering the question, but, you know, I feel like people need to acknowledge that they're brought up in this country and that there's just no escaping it. We've never had any truth and reconciliation in this country to face our history. You know, whether that's, you know, settler colonialism, whether that's slavery, you know, whether that's, you know, keeping out, you know, the Jewish folks who were trying to come here during World War II. Like we just whitewash it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, until we really have some truth and reconciliation, we're not going to be able to, you know, sort of move on from that and say, you know, there is a fair system that we've all started from.
Right.
And, you know, so anyway, I think that there's a lot that people can do to educate themselves and to really do self-reflection, and like, you know, like writing like workbooks on like becoming sort of anti-racist.
Okay,
and not
that's
just
good. That's good. And I'm only interrupting you because you touched on something because when you said white people need to acknowledge it, and I love where you're going now, because now you're giving concrete tools on how you can acknowledge it. Because a lot of the questions that people have asked are, well, how do I acknowledge it? Am I supposed to walk around every day as a white person saying, I benefit from systemic racism? You know, don't be so dramatic, okay? It's not, nobody's saying you have to walk around with a scarlet letter. We all know it. We all know it, okay? So we get it, you know what I mean? Especially, we get it. But do you get it is the question. And how are they supposed to acknowledge it and walk in truth and support the movement? Like, I love the writing down. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I just think taking some account of things that in your life where you've like shown, or well, you've, you know, been raised in a way that where you've benefited from your privilege. And it may be things that you've never really even thought of, you know, just, you know, some more obvious things like you walk into a store and no one's following you, thinking that you maybe are taking something, or that you were put into the gifted class where you're at your school, but was it because you were gifted, or because sort of largely the white children were put into this gifted program, and not the students of color? You know, I mean, there's so many things, but just
There's so many things.
so many, right? It's like everything.
So many things. I mean, let's not get started. Like, I can't tell you how, even in my previous position, I'm not going to name names, but it goes down to just the basics of our hair. You know, either not getting the job, or being told how to wear your hair, or, you know, being suspended from school. I know you've heard those stories where kids are being suspended from school for having their hair, and what we love is protective hairstyles, and we love to fancy our hair in different ways. But you don't get that. White people don't get that. And so when you have to think about going in to get your education and whether or not you're going to be told by power that be that you have to go home, or they're going to question you because of your hair, like, have you ever even had to think about something like that?
No, or for my white children, no. I mean, it's just, right. Yeah, and you know, also think about their safety as they go out into the world. Yes, you know, you know, their gender certainly impacts their safety, but also the color of their skin gives them a blanket of protection that you don't have if you're a person of color. And you know, I think that we, you know, white people unfortunately sort of weaponize our whiteness, and
Speak on it.
I mean, you just, I mean, we use this as both a weapon and as a shield, and and then we don't know what to do with it when confronted by things that it may do, even unintentionally, and so then we might cry, especially a white woman, and then what does that do to the other person?
White tears.
Right, and then now, are you put in the position of now comforting me because of something that was racist that I said, and now you're comforting me because I'm crying because you called me out on something that I did that was insensitive? White people, partly what keeps us afraid from speaking out is that we're worried about saying the wrong thing, right? Do we say African American? Do we say black? Do we, what do we say? We don't want to offend, not, some white people intentionally offend.
Sure.
But the sort of good white person
Yeah.
doesn't want to offend. And so sometimes we don't say anything. So, yes, I do worry about how I'm perceived, but you need to feel comfortable sometimes making mistakes and feel, you have to feel comfortable speaking out. I mean, that's also partially my personality, is that I do speak out. I do feel comfortable, speaking up if I see something that I feel is wrong and unjust. So it's hard, like when you're in a work situation, if you hear somebody say something that you're like, whoa, that wasn't okay. We're all white people here. Do any of us say something?
Right. Yeah.
You
talk about that.
You have to have somebody who's willing to say something.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of an example of a friend who told me about this story. They were on a call because everything's so virtual now, but this was a work call. And there were a number of people on the call, a couple of people of color. And then a comment was made like, well, we're just not going to throw a bunch of money at certain people just because they're black. And the person said that everybody was silent. And then I thought, well, so what did you do? And this particular friend is white. And then he said, you know what? After the silence, it felt like forever, but eventually somebody, wasn't him, but somebody said, I don't think that's appropriate. Just kind of putting it out there. And then nothing, well, I don't know what happened, right? Because I'm not in the office. But in that moment, nothing really happened. They just kind of brushed it along. But at least somebody said something, at least to get the wheels turning, and not everything, just to let everything slide. Because I feel like that's what we've been doing for so long in this country. Some of us included, black people, brown people included, because we want to get along. We don't want to ruffle too many feathers. We worked really hard to get to this level in this company, where we may be the only person of color sitting there. And a comment like that gets made, and you don't want to be the one to say, hey, because then of course, how many times have we've been labeled too sensitive? You're too sensitive. Oh, you're just making too much of it. There's nothing there.
Not everything's about race.
Yeah.
Trey.
It's like, yes, it is. Everything is about race. Let's just put it out there on the table, because this country is all about race.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about it. Stop acting like this is not a thing. It is absolutely a thing. And the fact that we need, and some people may disagree with me on this, but I wholeheartedly believe that we need people like you, Amie, in this fight. We need white allies, because we can march up and down the streets, just us, all day long. But if we don't have anybody else in the room, it's like, imagine being on that call and being the only person of color, and then how powerful is it to have somebody who represents the greater structure on that call say, that's not cool, that's not appropriate. Man, it's like, yo, I'm not alone, and hey, maybe we can make some changes here. You know what I mean? Maybe, one little baby step at a time.
I mean, it's a perfect example of when you can use your privilege, because asking the person of color to speak up is really not fair, because they have too much to lose. And as a white person, you really don't have anything to lose in that situation. And it is, take one of those chips and push it across the table, like right there and then, and say, like, hey, that's not okay.
I love it.
And so those are the types of things that make a difference. And at the moment, it might be just making a difference in your workplace and how this person feels who's on the call listening to that. But that's enough, and that's important. So, I mean, I mean, being anti-racist is more than just being not racist, right? You have to actively work to end systemic racism. It has to be, it's not just a passive state of not being racist. It's taking steps to say, you know, I want to change systems of oppression in our country. And for me, it really started out as being mass incarceration, wrongful conviction, the death penalty, which all disproportionately impact people of color. But from there, it's become, gun violence. I'm also a gun violence prevention activist. It's become, I do less work with sort of schools and education and housing, but I sort of keep my eye on those things. Unless we start really like changing, the main parts of the system that are causing all the things that cause mass incarceration, right? All the building blocks that got us there. Those things we're not going to, I don't want to start at the end point, right? I need to start more at the beginning too, and start making sure that we're equitable from the beginning. Black maternal health. I mean, all these things, right? Like, if you don't start sort of the building blocks, then working at the end of the system, you're unfortunately sometimes too late.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that this is a baby step kind of approach? Because it seems so overwhelming, right? I mean, systemic racism is in the fabric of America. Okay, so think about it. Just think about your blanket. If you had a thread that was interwoven all the way through this blanket, and you've been comfy and cozy, right? So I'm talking to some of my white peeps, my privileged folk, who, you wrapped up in this blanket, and but then you find out, hey man, there is a nasty thread going through this blanket. And I notice it, but if I tug at it too hard, or if I pull it all the way out right away, I'm gonna ruin the whole blanket. And I'm cozy, and I'm comfortable, and I like my blanket, right?
Totally. This is a great analogy.
What would you say you need to do to get that nasty thread out? Is this a long process where you just kind of cut little pieces along the way, or do you just try and rip that whole damn thing out?
Well, what I would like to do is rip the whole thing out. I mean, that's
so you.
That's just sort of where I would, I'm just definitely break the system down. I mean, I feel like, this summer especially, I think a lot of people's blinders came off. I mean, they were quick to put them back on. Yeah. But, seeing the murder of George Floyd, we have it on video. So, people were also outraged by the murder of Breonna Taylor, the murder of Ahmaud Arbery by racists in Georgia. Right. But they saw the over 8 minutes of George Floyd's murder, if they could stomach watching it. And I think that to some people, they realized that that would not have happened to them, to their white brother, to their white uncle, to their white neighbor, that was something that was unjust, and it was due to race. Until we have more people have those aha moments, which I don't want to see happen at the hands of other people. I was just going to say, how many more do we have to have? We don't. I mean, unfortunately, it happens too much, and we don't have to look across the country. Here in the Northwest, we had Kevin Peterson Jr. was just killed this summer by the police in Clark County. Quinice Hayes, Terrell Johnson. These are people in our community. Right. We don't have to look across the country, and we don't have to, think that this is just a problem somewhere else. It's a problem here in our city. It's a problem everywhere. Everywhere. So I think we do need to have people make that commitment. There was a great video, I don't know if you saw this summer. A woman was talking about sort of the looting was happening, and I wish I knew her name, the woman who is in this video, and when I say it, you may remember it. So looting was happening, and she was saying why looting was excusable.
Oh, I think I know exactly.
The monopoly.
Yes. She made a pretty damn good analogy.
She really did, and she just talked about how you set up this game of Monopoly here, and basically time and time again for Black people, the rules have changed. The board has been flipped over. Like
Yep.
anytime there's any gains made, it's, the whole thing is ruined. And, if it takes something like looting to rip the blinders off of people, to say that this is, we can't take this anymore, to draw attention to it, then so be it. And, I'm not somebody who would take part in looting, but I understand. You don't tell people who've literally had the knee on their neck for 400 years that what their way of protesting is wrong, especially when kneeling at football games was wrong, especially when marching in the streets peacefully has been wrong. Like what is right?
What is it gonna? Yes.
What is the right way to fucking
what are
make
we
attention
What are we
to this?
supposed to do at this point?
Yeah.
Nothing's really changing. Although I do feel like the fact that we're having these sorts of conversations, and they're happening all over. I mean, I'm not special in this way, having a conversation with you about this, having a wonderful friend who's, doing this work. But what in the world is it gonna take? I mean, it just makes you start to feel like I can't watch anymore on my social feeds of black men and women getting gunned down by police or people who think they're police. You know what I mean? I can't see it anymore. I'm almost starting to get desensitized. And that's terrible. My own eyes, my own body is starting to go, I literally scroll and go, damn, again, like the post, keep going. I'm tired. I am so tired. Who and how are we gonna keep this fight alive?
It is exhausting, and that is in part why we need to have white people become allies and accomplices, because you cannot ask folks who've been traumatized by our systems of oppression to now be the ones to carry the mantle to, correct it. It's too much. Yeah. It's just too much. And so, I guess I would just ask that white people take the effort, remove the blinders, like make yourself, put yourself in some vulnerability, right? To make yourself be vulnerable, to learn about, how we got to where we are, and put your own body and wealth and safety and comfort on the line too.
Yeah.
I mean, and when you said something like, oh, you're not afraid, like, yeah, I was afraid when like the police and the feds were attacking protesters in downtown Portland. It was really scary.
You were documenting it, and I was like afraid for you. I mean, I felt every bit of the movement. I just could not believe that you were literally filming live while literal tear gas and bottle, whatever was coming your way. And I was like, yo, Amie, okay,
get out of
there.
Right.
But there you are. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, I can't remember, but one of your hobbies is to protest, which I find fascinating about you, because if I were to list hobbies, protesting would be the last thing I would list. But for you, it is so part of who you are that you consider it like something you would do if you had any free time. That's where you would go. You would find, if there were no cause, you would find, if there was nothing, at front, there's always a cause. If there was nothing splashed on the front pages, you are there looking at every bit, every little bit of everything that is unjust and not right. And you are right there. And I love you for that.
I appreciate that. No, that is, you would ask me like, oh, what are your hobbies? And I was like, yeah, I mean, protesting, activism, the elections. I mean, now that we've had the special election in Georgia over, it's like, I'm like, I have all free time. Like, I would have to find a hobby. It's like,
or I can find more
maybe we get to January 20th, with our country intact. But yeah, I mean, it is what gets me going. And, what I want to make sure is that my children and my community, that I've made a difference, and my kids can look to me and be like, mom tried.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the most I can do is just try my best and just keep going one foot in front of the other and hope that it makes a difference. And it means a lot to me that you see it as making a difference. One thing you'd said too about us being friends is that white people don't have a lot of friends across race.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of reasons. I mean, we grow up in largely segregated schools. So if you're a white person, you're most likely only went to school with largely other white people. And if you're a non-white person, you have largely gone to school with people who are also not white, or you were in a neighborhood where you were maybe one of the few people who was a person of color in a white school. And so that sort of starts it out. And then maybe you go to college, which was more diverse, but you stay with the people that were familiar to you from growing up.
It's true.
And so you don't make any effort. And so I think, I mean, it can't be inauthentic, clearly, like that would make no sense.
Yeah, so please don't all of a sudden white people decide you need to go find you a black friend. No, it needs to be genuine. But we're out there, we're open to friendships. We're open to relationships.
Yeah, I mean, right, it's a problem in this country, and yeah, I certainly don't know the answer to it. I mean, but I think having a diverse group of friends is a good starting point, and maybe that's, that's someone you meet through activism. That's someone you meet because you show up. I guess one of the things actually too that I would want to say too is that I see myself as somebody who shows up, and that is basically my highest calling. And so maybe that's a friend who lost a parent and I show up with a pot of soup. Maybe that's, a friend who had a baby and I might show up with the same soup. I have a lentil soup that I make.
The leftovers.
Not the leftovers, but the same recipe as somebody else. But but I also show up, and I show up for, whether it's a vigil. So when Kevin Peterson Jr. was shot in Clark County, in Vancouver, I went to the vigil. I didn't know him, but I showed up. And so I value showing up in the people that are close to me, and I value that in myself. And so I think showing up, being somebody who shows up, is a good way to make those friends. Right. And so whether that's hopefully it's not at a vigil for somebody who was murdered by the police, but hopefully maybe it's at a community event, at a black church. Right. Show up and be there, and just don't make it about you. Set up the folding chairs.
Yeah, that's a good one. Don't make it about you.
Don't make it about you.
Because you know what's so funny? When you just said that, it reminded me of the SNL skit that Bill Burr did, where he was talking about how some white women have taken over the movement and have somehow made it about them.
Oh, yeah.
And I was laughing, but I was kind of like, I've been around some of those. Not you, but some of those. So that's another thing. That's a good tip to tell people. Like, when you decide, if and when you decide to show up, just help out. Don't make it all about you showing up. Like, right. I'm here, look at me, I'm doing this. It's about, no, boo, it's not about you.
Yeah. Like busy, putting the halo on your head because you showed up. That's not it.
Right,
that is definitely not it. And I think that is a problem, is that, white people often center themselves, and people do in general, right? We're all the star of our own movie, but white people are often centering themselves in any room and in any situation. And so I think, showing up, and it's not about you. Mm-hmm. And I have a loud voice. I am a talker. Mm-hmm. And so I need to remind myself, listen.
Okay, that's another good tip.
Yeah, show up and listen, and be a listener, and learn, and be open to learning, and getting feedback. So I'm not I'm an extrovert, I guess. I'm not a showman necessarily, but I'm more of an extrovert. So yeah, I think it's just sort of taking, sometimes when I have something I want to say, I might just make a little, a check in my hand, okay, you wanted to say that, but you kept yourself quiet.
Okay.
Okay. Sometimes, don't always be the one to speak up.
Okay. Listening is good, especially when you are still learning.
Yeah. Which
obviously, if you're going to an unfamiliar place or an unfamiliar organization, you are learning.
Yeah.
So listening is, hopefully, yeah. But at least you're exposing yourself at the very least. And then hopefully you listen more than you talk.
Yeah, a lot more. Yes. Hopefully
Yes.
A lot more listening. Yeah.
Yes, it's necessary though, because, and that's in any situation. That's not just, in the situation we're talking about, but just in anything. If you, you don't get into a course wanting to learn something and then sit up there and try and upstage the instructor because you think no, shut the hell up, sit down, absorb it, listen. And then you take the knowledge that you got, you play it out in your head, you do what you got to do, and you go back. You go back. I think that's another tip though. Don't stop at just going to one thing. You have to continue. If you're going to be about this activism life, about this ally life, you have to continue to go back, even though it's uncomfortable. And would you say that there are times when you've been uncomfortable?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And not just around issues of race, right? But just in general, because you're showing up somewhere where maybe you don't know people, and so that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and I understand that. I think maybe less so for me than other people because I feel like I can talk to most people, but yes, it is uncomfortable at times, and sometimes you do make mistakes and you do say the wrong thing, and be open to learning that and apologizing for when you've caused harm, and not then again making it about yourself by crying, but just you may go home and cry, fine,
right,
but don't in the moment just take it in and say, I'm so sorry, that wasn't my intention.
That's good though. Ownership
of
mistakes, because mistakes happen. I mean, we all make them. And that's the one thing I have an issue with cancel culture. And this might be another situation for another conversation, but just to throw that out there, I'd rather see people get appropriate counsel than be completely canceled, unless they deserve it. Now, there are some people out here who deserve to be canceled. Okay, and I'm sure we know of at least one.
We could think of someone.
We're sure we can think of at least one. But in general, I like to believe that people are inherently good, but we make mistakes. And I've made mistakes. And I would hope that nobody is judging me off just the mistakes. You know what I mean? I don't want to be canceled because I'm on this show and maybe I say something that offends somebody. I'm pretty sure I will. But I don't want to be canceled for it. I'd rather be counseled. And I would like that to be more of what we do than just outright like, oh, Amie was on here and then we did some digging and turns out one time she, kicked the dog. She would never kick a dog. But let's just say somehow, some way you accidentally did or whatever, and then everybody's like, we don't care about, Amie anymore. What do you mean? Wait a minute, if she acknowledged that was a mistake or that was wrong, how about there be more counsel than straight up canceling people?
Yes, I mean, so because I work in criminal justice reform and among folks who've been wrongfully convicted or not wrongfully convicted, people who have had a conviction, I mean, it's a core tenet that I don't believe people are the worst thing they've ever done. So, you can grow from your mistakes and from the error of your ways, and there have been times I've forgotten that. And I feel bad when I've forgotten that. I need to remind myself that not everybody is the worst thing they've done, and they've probably put a lot of good out into the world too.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think it's very important to be forgiving in that way. And there are people on staff where I work who are formerly incarcerated, and they've paid for their crime by doing the time that they had to do, and they absolutely should be welcomed back into society and be a member of our society and treated as equals. In some states you don't have voting rights even after you've finished serving your time, and I find that to be really wrong. And I'm actually hoping in Oregon that we can restore voting rights to those that are currently incarcerated, because I feel like you need, and to me, it's part of it's a civil right to vote. And so,
well, we could take it back to that systemic racism, that nasty thread, because when you said who's getting incarcerated at more rates, people of color, well then you strip away their citizenship in a way. Now they can't vote either, so now they have no say in the leadership in which they live or anything. To me, it's all, it's all in this grand design, and it's disgusting. It's disgusting.
It absolutely is. You're right. And, here in Oregon, we incarcerate people of color at a rate that is equal to the Deep South. an ounce.
Wow.
It's disproportionate, right? So
Yeah,
it's proportionate
yeah.
to our percentage of people in our state who are people of color. So we disproportionately incarcerate them. So it's, we see ourselves in Oregon as like we're an exception because
Yeah.
we're so progressive. We are not an exception. We were a state that was founded as whites only. We're, if anything, exceptionally racist.
Thank
and
you.
so we need to acknowledge that. And until it is widely acknowledged, we're not moving forward. So
You talk about reading and educating yourself. If you have not read the book A Peculiar Paradise, I suggest you read it because it will definitely let you know the history of Oregon. I moved here and I was like, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be such a liberal, progressive place. And man, was I thrown for a loop. It's not the worst place, but there's things that we can work on. And I know you're actively working on them every single day, not just here, but for our whole country. And I love and appreciate you so much, Amie. I could sit here and talk to you all day, you know that.
I would love to. And we should do this.
We should do this
more.
again. I know,
Yes.
right? Well, thank you so much for being here.
This was a great honor. I really appreciate having this conversation, and hopefully it was educational. And if I said anything that was offensive, I sincerely apologize.
I don't think so. I'm calling it. I think everything Amie said was on point. Thank you so much. Now, if you want more information on Amie, we'll have more information for you. I hope you don't mind if we connect people with you.
No, that would be great.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, you guys, man, like I said, I could sit here and talk about this all day. This is a conversation that's definitely necessary and can continue. And I suggest that you continue to have these conversations in your own groups. Why not? And if you have any comments, leave them for us. We would love to hear from you. Again, this is Situations and Conversations. I am your host, Trey Renee, and I think this world would be so much better if when you think me, think we. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Thank you, Amie.